Have you ever wondered why, even when you give her your best, your affection, your effort, your protection, something still feels off? Why she pulls away just when you believe you've given her everything? Why your steady love feels unseen? Why your careful control creates more distance, not closeness? She doesn't want your love. Not the kind the world has taught you to offer. Not the measured, managed, well-packaged performance of care. Not the calculated generosity or protective pride. She wants your surrender. Not submission, not weakness, not your collapse. She wants the version of you that exists beneath your defenses, raw, unmasked, vulnerable. Because the feminine does not seek safety in logic. She does not feel held by structure alone. She is not moved by effort without essence. She wants to meet the part of you that trembles, the part you've hidden, even from yourself, the part that cannot be performed, cannot be perfected, cannot be predicted. That is the mystery Alan Watts spoke of. That woman, in her deepest essence, is not looking for the man who protects her from life. She is looking for the man who can meet life with her, not stand above it, not explain it, not control it, but feel it, all of it. She does not crave your certainty. She craves your presence, your undoing, your stillness in the chaos, your willingness to touch the storm without taming it, because she is the storm. And the only man who can truly love her is the one who can let go of the need to understand her and simply stay. The modern man has been taught to offer provision, to offer logic, to offer strategies for love. But the feminine doesn't want to be fixed. She wants to be felt. She doesn't want your solutions. She wants your surrender, the surrender of your ego, the surrender of your scripts, the surrender of that tight grip you hold over emotion. She watches the way you hesitate before softness. She feels the way you manage your vulnerability. And though she may not speak it, her soul withdraws, not because you didn't try, but because you didn't open. And she can only truly love what is open. This is not about emotional exposure for performance. It's not about oversharing to gain approval. It's about truth. Can you sit in your shame and stay with her gaze? Can you feel your rage without projecting it onto her softness? Can you let her chaos shake you without running? The feminine is an ocean. She will not anchor to someone who refuses to swim. She wants your naked heart, not your polished promises. She wants the part of you that weeps for beauty, that trembles before truth, that kneels, not in worship of her, but in surrender to the mystery she reflects in you. Because the feminine is not just a woman, she is the mirror of everything you hide, the mirror of your shadow, your anima, your longing. She reflects it, not to shame you, but to summon you, to invite you into a deeper kind of love, one that is not built on performance or pride, one that does not need explanation or ownership, one that demands only presence. Alan Watts said, the more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. And that is why she recoils from your need for control. She wants life, movement, truth, even when it's messy, especially when it's messy. She will not stay with the man who needs her to be simple. She will not bloom in the hands of a man who needs her to be safe. But she will open wildly, completely, for the man who meets her chaos with breath instead of resistance. For the man who lays down his armor, not to be conquered, but to finally be seen. And she will see him. She will see the boy behind the man, the ache behind the eyes, the fear behind the strength. And she will not turn away. Because what she wants, what she has always wanted, is not your power, not your plan, not your pedestal. She wants your surrender. And when you give it, not in collapse, but in consciousness, the dance begins. The dance of the masculine and feminine is not about roles, it is about rhythm. One gives structure, the other gives flow. One holds the frame, the other paints in color. But too many men confuse holding with hardening. They mistake presence for dominance and think love is proven by control. So they stand tall, proud, offering loyalty, offering protection, but never offering themselves. And the feminine feels it. She feels the tension beneath the touch, the distance behind the compliment, the fortress behind the smile. She smiles back, perhaps. She thanks you. But something inside her pulls away. Because no matter how many words you offer, she listens to energy. She watches your posture. She senses the armor. She is not waiting for you to be perfect. She is waiting for you to be real. And real is terrifying. Because real requires you to descend, not just into her mystery, but into your own, into the places you've avoided, the griefs you never named, the shames you've buried in productivity, the rage you've tamed into silence. She does not want you to bleed on her altar, but she wants to know you have blood. She wants to feel the heat of your truth, not your rage projected outward, but your depth held inward. The wound is not that men feel too much. The wound is that they were taught not to show it. That surrender was shameful. That vulnerability was weakness. That softness was feminine and therefore wrong. But what if surrender was not collapse? What if it was power? What if the truest strength was to open your chest, not to show scars as trophies, but to say, I'm still here and I still feel? The feminine doesn't need you to be unbreakable. She needs to know you will stay when you break, that you will breathe instead of run, stay curious instead of correct. Let the wave pass through you instead of trying to name it. Because the feminine is not a puzzle to solve. She is a current to swim with. And those who try to tame her always lose her. Alan Watts spoke of this, how the desire to possess is rooted in fear. How love becomes hollow when it seeks to control. How beauty dies the moment we try to cage it. And that is why she cannot stay where she must perform, where her wild is a threat, where her chaos is labeled inconvenient. She wants to be met, not managed. And when she tests you, as she will, it is not to belittle you. It is to feel your depth, not how loud you are, not how right, but how present. When she storms, can you stay grounded? When she softens, can you follow her there? When she retreats, can you wait without grasping? She doesn't want your domination. She wants your devotion. Devotion, not to her form, but to her essence, to the mystery she carries, to the place in you that only she can call forth. Because the feminine, in her highest truth, is not here to please you. She is here to initiate you, to awaken the parts of you that have been sleeping behind performance, to draw out the courage beneath your armor, to soften the man who has mistaken control for peace. She doesn't want your love. If that love is only a mask, if it cannot bend, if it cannot break, if it cannot feel, she wants the man who meets her not from above, but from within. The man who has walked through his own darkness and still chooses light, not as a performance, but as a practice. She is not your reward. She is your mirror. And if you let her, she will show you who you really are. Not just the man who protects, but the man who surrenders. And in that surrender, she finally trusts, because she has never needed you to be perfect, only present. There is a moment always when she will stop responding, not with anger, not with words, just absence. Her eyes turn distant, her body grows quieter, her presence begins to dissolve, and you may think it's because you failed to be strong. But the truth is, you failed to be open. Because the masculine, when disconnected from the heart, becomes a performer. He offers logic where emotion was needed, solutions where silence was sacred, control where surrender was the only invitation. She felt you calculating instead of connecting, managing instead of meeting her, and so she drifted, not because you weren't enough, but because you weren't present. You see, love without presence is like flame without heat. It looks right, but it doesn't warm, it doesn't burn, it doesn't awaken. She wants the fire, not the image of it, but the burn, the unpredictable, vulnerable heat of your full self. Because what she's really asking is not, do you love me? But can I feel you here? Are you with me? Not just in form, but in truth. And truth cannot be performed. It must be lived. The feminine carries her own wildness. She doesn't need your protection from life. She needs your partnership in it. She needs to know that when she collapses, you don't flinch. That when she spirals, you don't shame. That when she feels everything at once, you don't try to make her small enough to manage. She wants to be too much for you, just long enough to see if you'll stay anyway. Because it's in that too muchness where she finds her freedom. And only a man who has made peace with his own shadow can sit beside hers without retreating. Alan Watts said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. And that's what so many men attempt in love. They try to hold identity so tightly to be the unshakable provider, the logical leader, the composed presence, that they forget what the feminine wants most, your realness. Not who you think you should be, who you are when you stop pretending. That man, the one behind the posture, behind the answers, behind the I've got this. The man who still remembers what it is to tremble, who still lets his voice break sometimes, who still feels wonder, not only in her body, but in her being. Because that man, the one who surrenders his image in order to truly meet her, he is unforgettable. Not because he conquers, but because he listens. Not because he knows what to do, but because he's willing to not know, to be with her in the mystery instead of retreating into mastery. She is the mystery. And if you need her to be clear and clean and linear, you will lose her because she's not here to be simple. She's here to be sacred. And sacred things do not perform. They invite presence. They require reverence. So when she asks, not with words, but with her energy, are you here with me? She's asking something more ancient than language. She's asking, will you join me at the edge of everything you cannot control? Will you stop trying to fix me long enough to feel me? Will you die to who you thought you needed to be, just to be with me fully, in this breath, in this chaos, in this beauty? Because that is the only man she cannot resist. The one who gives himself, not his performance. His surrender, not his solution. His depth, not just his direction. She wants your surrender because in that surrender, she feels safe. Not safe because you'll never leave. Safe because you're fully here now. And when you give her that, the dance begins to change. Not a chase, not a conquest, but a meeting. Two flames, no longer trying to contain each other, just burning together. The greatest illusion of modern masculinity is this, that to be loved, you must be in control. That to be worthy, you must never falter. That to be chosen, you must prove, persuade, perform. But what if everything she's aching for is the one thing you've been trained to hide? Not your power, but your presence. Not your certainty, but your capacity to stay uncertain. Not your control, but your surrender. Because the feminine is not drawn to perfection. She is drawn to aliveness. She watches how you breathe when the conversation turns raw. She listens for the hesitation in your voice. Not to judge it, but to feel you through it. She tracks the moments you go quiet. And whether you stay present there. You think she wants strength, but strength without softness feels like distance, and distance to her is death. She needs to feel you close, not your hands, your soul, not your confidence, your courage to be undone, because she's not interested in the man who never shakes. She's interested in the one who shakes and doesn't run, who stays, who breathes through the heat, who lets himself be broken open, not by her, but beside her. She doesn't want to conquer you. She wants to call you forward, not into submission, into surrender. And the difference is everything. Submission is collapse. Surrender is choice. Submission is silence. Surrender is presence. Surrender says, I see you, I feel you, and I will not abandon myself or you in this moment. Alan Watts called this the dance, not of two halves making a whole, but of two wholes meeting in motion, spinning not to complete each other, but to awaken something sacred through each other. And that awakening can only happen when the masks fall, when the armor loosens, when the man lets go of needing to be the knower, the fixer, the shield, and becomes the mirror. She's not waiting for a hero. She's waiting for a witness, someone who will hold her chaos without naming it, who will stand in the wave without demanding the water calm. Because what she wants isn't order, it's intimacy. and real intimacy only happens in the unknown. So, if you truly want her, don't try to impress her. Don't try to explain yourself. Don't try to convince her of your strength. Be still, be clear, be here. That is the rarest thing in the world to her. A man who knows how to be with her, not over her. A man who is curious instead of certain. A man who is willing to feel instead of needing to win. Because in the end, what she wants most isn't the man who knows what to do. It's the man who knows how to be with her, with himself, with the silence between them. And if you can be that, if you can lay down your story, your pride, your performance, you will see something extraordinary. She softens. Not because you made her, because you gave her room. She lets go. Not because you demanded it, because she felt your surrender first. And that's the mystery revealed. She didn't want your love. She wanted what love is made of. Your attention, your breath, your humility, your willingness to die to who you thought you had to be, so you could become who you are with her. She wanted your surrender, because only in that surrender can the dance truly begin. In the end, it's not your words that stay with her. It's your silence and what it holds. Not your promises, but your pauses. Not your declarations, but your presence. Because she has heard all the right things before. She has seen love offered like a performance, felt hands that touched without presence, eyes that looked without truly seeing. And so she waits. She waits not for a savior, but for a man who has been stripped of illusion. A man who has walked the narrow bridge between ego and essence and made it across with nothing but truth. She doesn't want your gifts. She wants your gaze, steady and unafraid. She doesn't need your assurance. She needs your stillness when she's falling apart. Because if you cannot hold her in her wildest moments, she knows you cannot meet her in her deepest ones. And she will not shrink for you, not anymore. You see, the feminine was never asking for comfort. She was asking for devotion, not to her moods, but to her soul. And that soul will test you, not to punish, to initiate into feeling what you've long hidden, into standing where your fathers collapsed, into softening where you once clenched. She is the storm, yes, but she is also the stillness after, the deep blue quiet, the sacred hush where you meet yourself again. And you are not here to conquer her. You are here to meet her, to let her undo the parts of you that were never truly you, to let her pull you deeper, not into her, but into yourself. This is the truth Alan Watts whispered beneath his words. That love is not an answer. It is a dissolving, a merging, a falling in without needing to land. And the masculine, when truly surrendered, doesn't disappear. He becomes vast, spacious, capable of holding not just her body, but her becoming, because the feminine is always becoming, and she is watching. Not for how well you predict her turns, but how present you remain as she turns. Not for how perfectly you understand her, but for how softly you stay when she is unknowable. And when you stay, when you stop trying to solve her and start allowing her, everything changes. She no longer tests, she trusts, she no longer guards, she gives. And that gift, her full surrender, only comes to the man who gave his first. The man who offered his depth, his truth, his fear, his ache, his breath, without needing to be praised for it. The man who chose presence over pride, stillness over strategy, awareness over armor. And in that choice, he did not lose himself. He met himself, perhaps for the first time. Because she didn't want the man the world trained you to be. She wanted the man you buried, the man you forgot. And now, in the soft light of this awakening, you realize she never needed your love dressed in certainty. She needed your surrender wrapped in truth. And now that you've given it, not with fear, but with reverence, she looks at you differently. Not because you conquered her, because you finally allowed her to be what she has always been. Not your reward, not your possession, but your reflection. And in that reflection, you no longer see someone to chase, but someone to meet. Not once, but again and again, as the mystery, as the dance, as the divine feminine embodied in form. She no longer waits to be understood. You no longer need to understand, because now, finally, you're both just there, breathing, burning, becoming, and that changes everything.